Hello, hello. I don't see you do the little thingies. It's not doing the stars. My recorder thing.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it unmuted. Let's check our work.
Oh, boy.
This one is the Zoom, so that's good.
It's in the microphone.
Oh, you've got to make sure on this one. You have to have it in. Oh.
Menu.
Modes. You have to be in normal and not simple.
I am not normal, but I am pretty simple.
Done it. Oh, and then we do have to hit record. You also have to hit record to test it. And we'll stop it and then you can restart it when you're ready.
Fine. Okay, are we testing still? Or we?
Yeah, it worked, but if you want to hit record again,
Okay, there we go. Okay, it's recording.
then stop it.
No, it's all executive.
Oh,
There we are.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, everybody. Today is Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024. Happy July 4th week. And this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. My name is Mike Wickers, the mayor of Cottonwood Heights. So we'll start off our meeting with item number 2, which is a review of our business meeting agenda for this evening. And we'll start with the pledge. You okay? We have our new interim city manager leading us in the pledge.
So what, remember?
I know you've got a lot on your plate too, so anyway, that's okay. We'll have you do that. Well, it says comment period. We have 2 quarterly staff reports today. So Chief, yeah, are you gonna do that or Candy or?
Candy's gonna do it.
Okay.
She'll be great. She's prepared.
Okay, great. We'll introduce Candy then for that, and then our Public Works report from our Director Maship.
I'm all over it, man.
All over it, love it. So our 4 action items for tonight, the first one being the consideration of resolution 2024-46, approving entry into an agreement with Schmidt Graphics and Signs for installation of public art. I do not see Ann Etchell here.
Paul may know about it.
Possibly, Paul, do you know enough to talk about it?
I believe Mike put a memo together. It was based on a resident that contacted Councilmember Highland that they wanted to see if we could use the Hillside Plaza for an event while he's just sitting there.
Or no, this is
The
the
wrap.
this is
Oh,
the
the
wrap.
group. So a few meetings ago, we did a contract with Utah Power for the reps for the Arts Council. We have some artists, we have the photography, painted art and digital art. And so this is the contract with the company that will actually do the wrap of that art on the power boxes. And right now we have 8. It's a little bit over $5,000, but it's on Arts Council already budgeted money.
Coming
So,
out of the Art Council budget.
Yeah, so
Is it a vinyl wrap or what is it?
it's,
There's a premium material that they use for those
Yeah.
types of wraps. It's pretty durable, yeah.
Yeah.
How long
It's
do they
really
anticipate that it'll last each wrap? I mean, is it up for a year, 2
I'm
years?
not sure
Yeah,
the
it's quite a
details,
long.
but yeah, they do, and a lot of other cities use it, so.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I like the idea of adding art to our city, so I think it's a positive step. So is there any questions or comments from the council? Okay, so we will vote on that this evening. And by the way, that's to reduce Councilmember Holton's pay by half. Okay, next item, 5. Oh, hi.
Sell by $6.
Item 5.2, welcome. Consideration of resolution 2024-47, approving entry into a lease purchase agreement with Zions Bancorp for the lease of police and public works vehicles and associated equipment, and authorizing the execution and delivery of all related documents and the taking of all required actions. So Scott, you've worked with us on this one. I'll have you start with the background, and I think we all know what it is. but-
Yeah, so this is the purchase of vehicles. It's a total of 51 vehicles. 6 of them are public works. The remainder are police vehicles. This is the vehicles that are used daily predominantly by the individuals in police, and in public works, they're kind of somewhat shared between them. And it's the purchase of the vehicle plus the equipment add-ons in order to make it a complete usable vehicle for us. And then also the, the buyback from Ken Garth at the end of the 2-year period when we were able to sell those back. So anything else you wanted to add to that, Chief?
Well, most of those cars are already sold to other
Yeah.
departments, including the sheriff's office
Yeah.
and the UPD split, so there was some ugliness there, so they actually had to come and buy our cars from us.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
In the process, why is there an escrow requirement instead of the invoices coming directly to the city for payment?
So the bank likes, in essence, kind of quick transactions, and they want us to incur the cost before they distribute the money to us. But because of the delay related to the production of the vehicles, it could carry on for a couple of months. And so basically the bank is saying you need to get an escrow in order to run this through, because we're not set up in their loan department just to do multiple disbursements on the loan throughout time.
This is a loan.
Yeah, because it's in essence a loan. We finance it for that 2-year period, and then we pay it off at the end of that 2-year period. We call it a lease oftentimes, but it's just we're financing the vehicles over that time. And then at the end of that time, we have a buyback based on the number that we sell back to Vanguard. So.
Thank you.
Good question. Any others? Anything else? Okay, Shane, everything's good with you? Okay, perfect. We'll move on. The next item for tonight, 5.3, consideration of resolution 2024-48, approving entry into a vehicle repurchase option agreement with Car Enterprises Inc. for police and public works vehicles and associated equipment. Scott, anything you want to add?
I can tell you the total real quick. I won't go through all of them, but the total buyback would be $2,316,000 at the end of that 2-year period. We sell them back before they exceed the mileage and things, so that they have a vehicle that still has a warranty, so they can sell it. It keeps the value high for them, keeps the value high for us, and we don't incur a lot of repairs and things like that unless they get bumped or something along those lines. So they're out doing their work.
So you sell them back before the mileage goes over, so you never pay mileage?
Do we ever pay mileage?
We
I
pay
haven't seen
mileage
that.
when it goes over 33,000
Yeah.
miles, we pay 20 cents a mile over 33,000 miles.
But I don't think we've actually seen that.
No,
Have
they-
we? So,
He's correct, it's in the contract, but because we get some cars before this year, because the protection and problems are on their side of the house, we will go over, so they aren't gonna charge us. It's just part of the gig, it's just if you abuse it, but we've done it 16 years, never paid a penny.
The sequencing of these two contracts is important, although we're approving both of them tonight. Before we deliver the signed lease purchase agreement back to Garf, back to Zions, excuse me, we need to have the Garf agreement signed by Garf and in hand. So we don't want to obligate ourselves without having that parachute out. So anyway, just they'll be in the folder for you, Mayor, but we just need to hang on to them and sequence them in that manner, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I've mentioned before, I have multiple cities who have come to me that are actually following the same process now, that we were one of the first ones to do this, and they see the value in not worrying about maintenance and all the things that the higher buybacks that they get. So we were kind of a leader in this.
I think you're absolutely right. Back when we started doing this, nobody could understand it, and everybody thought we were hiding the marble somehow.
Yeah.
But now people understand what we're doing and that it works beautifully.
Yeah. Perfect. And then the last item for tonight, item 5.4, consideration of resolution 2024-49, accepting requests for indemnification. So Chief Russo, tell us a little bit about this. You okay with that?
Yeah, do you want me to tell you the specifics of the case in the open session, or do you want? It's up to Shane. I'm comfortable doing that.
Shane, I'll leave that up to Shane.
It's in the complaint, so it's public knowledge.
Yeah, you can give a thumbnail sketch. I think it's fine.
Officer's got a call on a suspicious vehicle down a dead end street in the city where they've had thefts and vehicle burglaries in the area. The officer's got a call down there. They confronted the driver. She had cans of whipped cream in her hand and was disoriented and incoherent. So she was huffing, they would call whipping it. Got her out of the car, got a warrant to take blood and urine signed by a judge, did so. Subsequent to arrest, they found heroin, methamphetamine on her, booked her in jail, charged her. The DA's office took the case. Unfortunately, the officer missed court once, got continued, missed court a second time. Case got dismissed, and we didn't hear anything about it. I did not know the case was dismissed. They never advised us that they did that. And so, this same attorney that was on other cases in the city that we keep hearing of, waited until the statute of limitations expired and then filed a lawsuit claiming that we abused her civil rights, and she was just a girl out looking for a cat, trying to lure him back with whipped cream, and that we used excessive force. And it's an absolutely clean case. We've looked at the video. There's nothing wrong with that. It is unfortunate the officer missed the court and we did get a conviction, but I am comfortable with the case. We met with attorneys today.
So what the chief has stated are the two sides to this dispute, and so there are two sides, and that's it's going to court, and we'll get a resolution. So that's why the lawsuit exists, and as allowed by the Governmental Immunity Act, the officers and employees who have been sued have the right to request defense and indemnity from the city. This has happened many times in the city's history, and so this is just they have that right. We do not have the right to deny defense and indemnity, but we can reserve rights if it turns out that they were acting outside of the course and scope of their employment responsibilities, and that's what we have done in this resolution.
Great, good explanation. Any questions? Great. Thank you. The last item that we'll consider tonight is just approval of the consent calendar, which are the minutes from the work session and business meeting from the city council from June 18th. Okay. So item 3, I do not see Ivan Whitaker here. Right? Has anybody communicated with him? That guy? Okay. So item 3, so if you don't understand, VEC is the acronym for the Valley Emergency Communication Center, which is the 911 system for which the city contracts services. That we have a new executive director, Ivan Whitaker, and he was gonna come here to present to us and talk over some of the things that they are doing. Tim was actually on the board for VEC. He was actually the chair of the board, I believe. He's just been made the chair, I think. But so they might be in need of a new board member as well, and then we'll maybe discuss that at another time. But he's not here, so maybe what we will do is move on to our staff reports, and if he shows up, we'll push him back a little bit. So we'll move on to item 4. And Mike, are you ready? Or do you want some time?
I'd like 1 minute and I'll be good, so we
Okay.
can start.
Okay, so the first item under staff reports is a Tabachi annexation update. As you know, Tabachi came with an annexation petition a few months ago. The council had multiple deliberations on this subject, anyway, so Mike has a little bit of an update for us, and we'll.
Mike, I'm already on. You want to just use my computer?
I have it right here. Be good here. Appreciate everyone's patience.
No worries at all.
Yeah. Okay. So not a ton of recent updates with Tabachi from previous conversations. But it has been a few months since we've discussed it in the council meeting, so we're just bringing it back to kind of remind the council where that is in its process and get some direction on what to do next. This is all background. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this unless there are questions. But obviously it's a 43 lot single family subdivision that is called Tabachi, and then the 50-acre parcel to the north owned by the same owners as the gravel pit. We've previously discussed this at length in terms of the access road, maintenance of the bridge and the road system, emergency services, development code differences for building permits, and then we've gone over tax projections. Really the outstanding issue at this point, and it kind of, when the petition was filed, this was still an outstanding issue, so it's not changed, is a minor subdivision plat amendment that's been in process with Salt Lake County I think, like I said, since they filed the petition to annex. I'll show you what that is briefly, so you have an understanding of the nature of it. And then tell you where that is, and then turn it back over to you. There is a platted, it's platted here, it's kind of highlighted in yellow, it's a little bigger than that, but a secondary access and I think a utility access easement platted into the subdivision today on the west side of that development. It kind of dead ends right over where the gravel pit kind of drops off the cliff directly to the west. So it's not really a viable secondary access of any sort unless you're in a bulldozer. What they've applied to do is vacate that easement and dissolve that access way into the two lots that are adjacent on the north and south. So it won't become a new lot, it'll just become part of the existing lots there. And relocate their easement to the north of the property along an existing Salt Lake City Public Utilities access easement that they used to access that water tank up there. And that's really the nature of the plat amendment. So that we met with them 2, 3, 4 weeks ago at this point, asked for a status update. What they've conveyed on this is every entity has reviewed that plat at Salt Lake County except for the water district, which is Salt Lake City Public Utilities. And it's been hung up in Salt Lake City's review as long as this has been pending. Originally, we had recommended to them, hey, resolve this plat amendment before we vote on it. That way, if we vote on it and say the subdivision annexed into the city and the plat amendment's unresolved, then they would have to reapply and start that plat amendment review over again. It's not a substantial plat amendment. It's fairly technical in nature. It is, there is review time and process involved in doing this. So we were trying to clean that up so they wouldn't have to start that over. That being said, they're expressing some difficulty in working with Salt Lake City Public Utilities and some desire for the council to consider moving forward with the vote, even with this outstanding, with the understanding that if this is voted to be annexed and the plat amendment's still pending, they would have to reapply with us.
I need you to show me where this lies. If you talk about on the north side of Tavachi.
Yeah.
That is, I was under the impression they were doing something closer to SR 190 on the south side, but it's something on the north. Can you bring up that and show exactly where that is?
Yep, you can see the non-red area there. That's the easement.
So how would this serve as an additional egress ingress?
So what that document I showed proposes right now, if you can follow my cursor here. Presumably you can drive up this easement way and then around this way, and the water tank is up in that general area.
So this does not give them an egress ingress for their residents to come in and out. I don't understand what purpose this serves.
It could eventually go into the gun club road to the north.
It could, if this area up above the gravel pit is ever developed, and we're not sure if it's developable at all, then that easement presumably would tie into that area. That's, like I said, that's been pending. That wasn't a county requirement or a city requirement. They proposed that as a relocation for that thing in the box right there on the west side that also just kind of dead ends over the crest of the gravel pit.
What's the likelihood then of having a secondary access? Doesn't seem as likely as I thought.
For actual vehicular access. The fire department, UFA, is the reviewing entity for Salt Lake County. They don't need a secondary access, so they've approved it without one. The homes are fire sprinkled. There's building code requirements associated with that. So a secondary access is not mandatory. What we recommended to them is as you finalize or continue to work on your easement, even understanding that UFA does not require a secondary access, you should design it in a way that could be viable if there were ever an opportunity for secondary access to make that easier. So not a requirement, but a recommendation.
Well, I think I speak for the people and the constituents in District 4 who have expressed their concern and followed this project from its inception over a decade ago. The concern is that the existing singular way to get in and out of Tavachi, the plateau above the gravel pit, is a very high-tech, road that includes a bridge And so I thought that the council, one of the reservations that was expressed here at the council was not having both a secondary, but also perhaps a more practical, something that if, God forbid, this singular egress ingress have to be repaired and the HOA didn't have the funds to do it, we would have people trapped on that plateau. It could become a liability to the city. So I have thought we were in a waiting mode to find a secondary egress ingress, but now I understand it's actually located on the north side and it doesn't connect to anything in the foreseeable future. So I would have to express my continuing concern about approving the annexation proposal.
Great. Any other comments?
Well,
Mike, are you anything else you wanted?
That's
to
it.
add?
No, it's just, that's kind of the last outstanding item.
So the specifics of what we're talking about, they currently have a request into the county to dissolve or, what's the better word, Mike?
To vacate.
To vacate the secondary access requirement from the subdivision.
Yep.
And so, we have told them that, we want that resolved and we would rather them not pursue that. And they are in the middle of acquiring a new secondary access on the north side, which very easily could be made into a temporary, non-paved emergency access road to the gun club road. I've already had conversations with the other owner, Shelby. And so that is I think that's a more real option, especially in an emergency situation. So that's where
is
that
that
came from.
likely, or is that
It's not today, but yes, it's very
But
likely.
they're gonna apply.
Yeah. So if they have they vacated? They're
That's all part of this.
once they become annexed in, they vacate that secondary access request that they have in with the county.
and then they started all over again with the city?
If they annex it
They
and,
wouldn't-
and this is unfinished, then it would just revert
Apply
to
for
what it is today. They could choose to apply again and they'd follow our subdivision amendment process for that.
So a couple of thoughts that I have on this issue. I know a lot of the past discussions that we have been focused on the liability that the city might have should there be damages or issues with the road up there. And that's if the HOA becomes defunct, they don't have the funding, whatever it may be. So a couple of things. One, to my understanding, we would have no liability other than if the city council at the time decided that they wanted to do something about it. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and I know that we act as if that would just happen and it would become a liability, but there are so many decisions years and years down the road that city councils are gonna have to decide and deal with on if they want to take that. We have private roads that currently are in the city that we have made a decision that we're not going to manage. With other HOAs, there are other HOAs where they have their own roads. I don't think we necessarily have the discussions on if the roads fell and if it becomes our liability. Or if there's a apartment building that has an HOA, if elevators fell or things fell, that it becomes the city's liability. Frankly, it's a legislative decision where the city council would decide, okay, they're not able to make ends meet financially, so the city's going to step in and pay for it. I think that would be quite the precedence to set. And I don't think that I would feel comfortable if I was in a future city council making that decision that now it becomes our responsibility. And because it meets fire code, I think for me, that's my biggest thing is it safe?
Not only that, if a future council wanted to make that decision for some reason, you know how many private roads we have in our city? They're gonna make that determination for every private road?
And my point is whatever future council, that looks like that's their prerogative. They may make it have nothing to do with Tavachi and make that decision for other things. I mean, there are so many decisions that will be made or can be made by us that I personally don't see that as as a massive barrier. That's just something that city councils will have to face and have conversations about. And as long as it's safe in regards to fire code, which is what the discussion is mostly about, that they can leave in a safe manner for an emergency, I don't have issues.
I think it's the magnitude of the cost. If you talk about a private road like Royal Lane.
Yeah.
It's a surface road.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be kind of, if we take it on as a public road, there'd be an expense, but not that expense. So
Sure.
the magnitude of the cost does have to come
But-
into the risk calculation.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think a bridge is definitely much more expensive. There's no question. And I guess my point is it's not our liability. The decision to take upon that liability is purely a political decision on individuals of a community, of the Tavachi community, saying, hey, we can't pay for this. We need your help. We're residents. That is a political decision on listening to those comments and making a political decision and precedents for the future, if that's something that the city wants to go down or a road they want to go down or not. No pun intended.
This is an extraordinary development. This is not an apartment complex along Fort Union Boulevard, nor is it a private road like you find in any other part of Cottonwood Heights. This is an extraordinary, I don't think we know exactly what it would cost, but beyond the cost, if there was 150 people trapped up there, I can't imagine any city council that wouldn't say, we can't have 150 people trapped. And I'm not talking about getting them out, out by helicopter, but their life has to go on. That's where they live. So ultimately, the road, it's not going to be acceptable to have 150 people stranded for months or years until the singular roadway that they can travel on is repaired. So I think it's important to speak in distinctions and to think, in the kind of risk
I
management.
got one more thing. To follow up with that, I don't disagree with you. It is an extraordinary project and development. There's a lot of people that have significant amounts of money that are invested up there. If it comes down to we cannot access our own homes that we live in, that is not the city's liability. That is a liability that community is going to have to tackle. And trust me, they're going to tackle it collectively because they cannot access their home safely. And it is absolutely something that they're taking into consideration when they buy a development like that. When you purchase and you build and you put millions of dollars into a community like that, they're going to have to understand that these investments of getting to and from their community is going to have to be maintained by themselves. And again, if it comes down to this is not safe for me to even go to my house that I spent millions of dollars for, they're going to fix that. And if not, then that is their odd decision to make.
We just saw in Baltimore, I think it was Baltimore, right? Something happened similar, not even a natural disaster, but was it Baltimore? The bridge collapsed? Yeah, and the federal government came in and they is gonna rebuild the bridge. So anyway, in case those types of emergencies, that's, what FEMA and the federal government allows for emergency funds to be accessed.
Well,
So
a
it's not
public
a city,
bridge, respectfully, a public bridge with that kind of thoroughfare, I don't know if you could compare it with a private road in a city for 150 people, but anyways.
I guess my only point is we don't want to go too far into worrying about what future councils may have to worry about. We don't want to obviously set them up for failure, but that's a decision and a calculus that frankly we have had to make here as a council. I think right as I got on, there were requests for plowing and other services, and we've made that determination that we're not going to go down that road for precedent's sake.
Well,
So, anyway.
I would like to go on record that actually conversely, exactly what I see my role on city council is to look ahead into the future and ensure the viability. My allegiance is with the existing residents of Cottonwood Heights. And so my very purpose here at this table is to look out into the future, decades ahead, and determine where we're heading. So that's why I have to remain opposed to accepting the annexation.
I gained some comfort in learning about the lifespan of that bridge. In addition to looking at the future of that easement coming in, we talk about the future, that's something that's already been illustrated to us today. So that's given me some great comfort, and also knowing that UFA does not have an issue with this space. I don't see any barriers other than that. I don't think as a city, we can restrict ourselves and restrict others from a process like this when it's gonna end up being an overall positive for our community. And bringing in other members that can actually help contribute to our community in the way that we do.
So anything else, Mike, that you want to add?
No, we just need direction on whether you want to schedule this for consideration or not. That's kind of the next step in all this, understanding the plats.
So I made a phone call this past week to the executive director of public utilities and had a conversation with Laura Briefer, and she has not gotten back to me yet, but she's going to find out where they are in the easement correction that they're looking at, or amendment that they're looking at. And so as soon as we have an answer for that, if that gets resolved, I would be for communicating the council to put this on an agenda item to vote. So
Who is she?
Laura Briefer is the executive director of the public utilities, and that's the last organization that's holding up the easement amendment.
So are you saying that the city should communicate to the petitioners that we're just going to want to defer this until that's resolved by Salt Lake City Public Utilities, this easement issue?
We've had that conversation, and they actually are the ones that requested that we reach out to see if we could get some movement on it. And so that's why I made that phone call, was at their request.
But we're going to defer consideration until that gets resolved.
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
yes. Yep. If that's okay with the council. Okay, great. Thank you. Good discussion. Item B is Hillside Plaza event discussion. And oh, there's Ann right there. So Ann Etchell is here with us, our culture director, and we've had some requests for possible events at the current Hillside Plaza, not the future. And so we're going to talk about that. And so Ann, did you want to lead that off, Scott, or do you want to go?
No,
Or
Mike
Mike?
and Ann know much more about it than I.
I think Mike.
They put my name on the agenda, so I can, I'm happy to talk about it, but please, yeah.
Yeah, why don't you do
So
that?
there was a constituent who contacted me and said, wouldn't it be great to do some events at Hillside Plaza to start to generate some interest from all of our citizens and to give them a preview of what it will be like once we have a public space there. So it's really, I mean, his desire was to get people to start thinking about how amazing this can be once we have it. Then we turn it over to staff to give some recommendations.
Yeah, so if this is something the council's interested in, I'll just go over kind of some recommendations from the staff end, and then Ann can give much more insight than me on the logistics of event planning. But there's this whole kind of middle section that I highlighted in red. We would recommend utilizing, as much or as little of that area as is desired, but there's not direct business access. Sometimes you have cut through, in front of the storefronts there to get from one end or the other, but all of the tenants along there are vacant right now. So you've got the Dollar Tree on the west end and the other tenants on the northeast corner. But we really could utilize that, this plaza space, kind of back in this area. That's still, it's maintained, it's taken care of, it's in pretty good shape. So you could use that as a focal point, obviously adequate parking there to stage an event. We would not recommend utilizing any interior spaces of those tenants there. They're not, a lot of them are run down. They're not up to any sort of code. Utilities aren't on in most of them. But any sort of outdoor event there, we've got plenty of space to do it. We would recommend replacing the block party that we hold here, at least for just this year, with a similar event at Hillside Plaza. The timing sort of lines up as an end of August, end of summer kind of thing. And that way with staff resources and time, we're just replacing one event with another, and it's not.
When is that scheduled? Like,
typically later August, early September, in that ballpark. but you know, that's flexible. So that's what we would recommend, and then I'll kind of turn it over to Ann. Some of her feedback was provided in an email and in the council memo for you on, you know, different types of events, be food trucks or other
Yeah.
things there.
I mean, I think right now, maybe just doing, the planning department had food truck roundup on like Monday night or something like that. The only thing that I would recommend is having restrooms, porta potties brought in. And it depends on what kind of food truck roundup you want. Do you want people to stay, enjoy their food there? Do we have enough area for them to enjoy it there? Or do you want them just to come by and grab it, take it home? If you want them to stay, then you're gonna need to invest in some porta potties because you don't want them going into the stores that are already established and using their restrooms. So it's kind of what kind of thing you're looking for. If you want them to stay, do you want to bring some music in, or council is probably good for that. Some of those food truck companies that you can work with, which I know Mike has worked with them before, are kind of a turnkey. You just hire them, they bring people in, you really don't have to monitor them too much, they know what they're doing, sort of thing. So those are just some suggestions, but logistically, the only thing I would say is you need some kind of restroom, hand washing station, you know, with the restrooms.
What other elements are typically included in your block party?
We have historically have had local businesses through the business association involved there, having vendor booths. We've had a bike rodeo that's been popular in years past. Certainly, you know, we could engage with the South Valley Chamber of Commerce this year, where we haven't had that partnership in the past. I think we'd also take it as an opportunity to advertise, as you'll learn about in about an hour, kind of the city's plans for the Hillside Plaza, and use that as an opportunity to get the word out on the city's vision for that. So we try to plan it with, if you want to do a singular event, go a little bigger, have the food truck element there, have people stick around, learn more about the future of the site, and then have things for, you know, all ages to kind of be interested in.
I know during one of our arts council meetings, somebody mentioned like having a farmer's market there. You know, or having an opportunity to have oh my goodness, the folks that donate food, food bank come there and set up and offer people that are in the community to utilize that food bank truck, and a health van, a health bus to come in and offer some of the health services, just kind of rotating opportunities for community members to show up and actually see what's going on. Instead of just leaving this piece of property here without anything, but some of those things need to be really viable for us as a city to be able to get fees from. But I think that there can be some trade-offs with folks like the food truck people and others to be able to make this beneficial.
I really like Councilman Newell's idea. Great idea.
I like the idea of expanding it beyond just food trucks because of the opportunity to really showcase what can be done. And we talked about bike rodeo. I've mentioned it, but I'm gonna mention it again. The e-scooters and the e-bikes I've seen this summer, they're just everywhere. And I wonder about maybe some safety training, some opportunities there to really think about. Vendors would be great, because then you have a booth where you can show your geobond and what the town center could look like. So if we can drum up enough advertisement to get people there, I think it'd be a great community opportunity.
Well, along those lines, I'd like to add that the first introduction to e-bike event that I put on, it was not sanctioned by the city, but it was in 2022. After I'd taken office, the mayor came and spoke. It was really quite wonderful. And it was about bicycle safety, because riding e-bikes can be very dangerous as people, you know, start learning about them. And so I think that's a wonderful idea. It's summertime. People are exploring this. I love that we could make it educational as well as fun. That would be so.
Is there any liability we need to worry about?
I mean, I worry a little bit because it's an open space and bikes and stuff like that, the safety aspect of it.
Well, we could have a corral.
Because here, it's kind of no parking, no cars over there. And I was looking over it when I drove by. If you look, it does go downhill. I just drove by earlier. There's quite a bit of a slant, and you get kids on a bike and all of a sudden you lose them into the road. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it, but I always look at that safety issue when I'm looking and putting something together.
Well, I think
So
it's in
that
our,
worries
it's in our
me,
master
yeah.
plans to promote bicycling and walking. And so I think we need to understand how we can do these things. I mean, I'm not saying this is how it has to be done, but to dedicate everything to cars, we need to start thinking, how do we corral off an area? And this is the, bicycle or, walk and roll place. And inside there, it's again, a corral where people know that that's where they park their bike. Cause I can tell you, riding my e-bike for transportation nearly every single day, Cottonwood Heights has an opportunity working with CHBA and really thinking comprehensively, how do we encourage businesses to offer a safe place for people to lock their bike up? Right now, there's very few businesses in Cottonwood Heights that are aware of that. So this could be our foray into saying, we are genuinely invested in walkability, and here's the corralled area that's safe to place your scooter, your bike, your stroller, but whatever it may be.
So I guess the question is, so I think we all love the thought process of let's start to try create the desire to gather in a space that we own, and can we take advantage of it? But this is really, we're talking about just a few months now, because we're hoping by next spring this isn't possible, and there's a bulldozer there working. So I think we're open to case by case, if the liability is minimal and we can do some type of a thing that gets people to gather for a Saturday morning. I mean, I don't think any of us would have any issues with that, right? I think would be, that this is where we want people to learn to get to think about gathering in the future. And, it's just a short-term thing that we'd be willing to look at. So maybe if there's, I love the thought process of the, what you do, what do we call it?
Block party.
The block party.
Yeah.
I'd say 100%, let's do the block party there and make it as safe as possible, but then make it, and see if maybe we get more people out. Maybe if we do, then we get more people than we would get at City Hall. But so let's do that, move forward with that. And if there's case by case requests, let's look at them. Is that okay with
That's great.
everybody?
Thank you for considering this.
Mhm. Yeah.
That was a great constituent request.
Perfect. So item C under staff reports is an update in our form-based code. That our Community and Economic Development Director, Mike Johnson, and staff and all have been working really hard on helping us to create a form-based code and putting that into an official ordinance. So Mike, I'll turn the time over to you and let you know, have you let us know where we are.
Right.
Hi, how are you, Greg?
Mark Morris is here with
Mark.
Voda Planning. He's been our consultant on the form-based code. He's presented to the council a couple times in the past. Just to give you a brief timeline of where this code has been, and also to acknowledge Samantha DeSealhorst, our senior planner. She's done a great job managing the process up until now. We initially signed an agreement to begin drafting and researching and compiling information for a form-based code dating back to 2020. It wasn't 100% full on in 2020, but that's when this process really started. That's when the council initially gave the direction to explore this as a tool to start implementing the Fort Union Boulevard master plan. So that same year, the city contracted with Voda and Mark to begin that process. We got really pretty heavy into it in about 2022. Where we prepared a draft form-based code, some public information materials. We had a lot of introductory work session level presentations with both the Planning Commission and the City Council. February and December of 2023, we were at council work sessions, and I think Mark was here for both of those as well, providing updates. Just this past March, we held a public open house where we sent individual notices to every property and property owner that would be affected by a form-based code rezone along Fort Union Boulevard. Held that open house and then again sent them notices leading into June at the Planning Commission and had a formal public input process. And at that meeting in June, the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of the form-based code to the City Council, and that vote was unanimous. So now in the legislative process begins basically that same public input, review, feedback, and then consideration cycle by the city council after we have that planning commission recommendation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark here to walk through some overviews, some frequently asked questions, and then to answer any questions the council has. From a timeline perspective, this is in your hands now. So, you know, if the 15, 20 minutes we have tonight is not enough, we can bring this back as many times as you need to work through questions. I also want to let each of you know we're available offline to meet with you if you have questions about the code. As you saw in your packet, you know, the code itself is like 100 pages long. So we want to give the time and the resources to have you review this and consider it before voting on it. Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here again and talk a little bit about form-based code. As Mike mentioned, we had a public open house with kind of basic question and answer about the code, how it impacts property owners, what benefit property owners will have in these areas. I've got a little bit of information. We want to make sure that your questions are answered, you know, why we're doing this, what it is. We won't get into the nuts and bolts of the form-based code unless you want to, but really just to give you a summary overview of what the intent is. So Mike, if you would go to the next. On the right, we've got a list there of really what I would say the takeaway of a form-based code would be for you as council members. Form-based code is a different way to regulate land development. It's applied in a very context-specific way. So the form-based code that we drafted is really only applied to 3 intersection areas along Fort Union Boulevard. So it's really for some specific parts of the city. It allows for a variety of uses. So property owners get a lot more flexibility on what uses the city will give planning permission to. The focus is on how a building is located on the property and how that building form brings activation to the public realm. So that's really what the focus is. Use is still a consideration, but it's not the only consideration. Property owners who want to develop would have the form-based code applied to them. In no way is this code changing anything for businesses that are here today, or, you know, trying to force out anyone who has a successful business in the city. It's really when redevelopment happens in one of these nodes, the form-based code would then be applied. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay, great, Mike. So the 3 nodes that the form-based code would be applied to are these along Fort Union Boulevard. This boundary was drawn really through some a little bit of a process with city staff. All of these areas, for the most part, are currently zoned mixed use. And so the transition from a mixed use zone to a form-based code zone is pretty easy. The mixed use has a little bit of flexibility with use, but doesn't have the same types of requirements that a form-based code would have. So, so these 3 areas would be the first parts of the city where the form-based code would be applied to. In my experience, once a city has a little bit of comfortableness with the form-based code, you'll start looking for other parts of the city where this could be applied. It's not something that ever gets applied to single-family neighborhoods, but really is focused on redevelopment as these parts of the city you're already seeing some of that redevelopment happening. Mike. We've talked a bit about other cities that are using form-based code, some of them surrounding you here in Cottonwood Heights. Other cities seeing success in how form-based code is getting them the types of development that they're after. I know some of you traveled to Indiana, remind me of the city, you went to Carmel, Indiana, and saw how form-based code can be applied. Other cities nearby, Midvale, Mill Creek, South Salt Lake City, all of those cities are using form-based code in some regard. That again is getting them some development form that they're happy with. Mike. The benefit to current and future property owners, as I mentioned, is really flexibility of use. markets change and demand changes over time. What a form-based code really looks to is to have the built form of the buildings of the city infinitely reusable. When you have buildings that are really single-use types of buildings, you think of like a Walmart or a Home Depot, those building forms are really difficult to repurpose unless you're moving in a really huge international conglomerate. Not a lot of businesses can reuse 150,000 square foot warehouse style building. The form-based code really says, okay, in these specific nodes, we want to make sure that these buildings can be repurposed regardless of what the use is. And so it makes a far more sustainable approach to development that every time a building or a property changes hands, it's not a question of, okay, we're going to come in and clear cut this site because our use doesn't really work with these buildings.
So would form-based code disincentivize a Home Depot?
Not necessarily. It would have to take a very specific form to work with the form-based code. What the use is, like I said, is secondary in these particular nodes. That, you know, Home Depot is certainly possible, but it would have to meet some requirements. But fortunately, you've already got a.
Yeah, for sure. I was just curious. The reason I asked that is I'm thinking of form-based code, and if we had it in place decades ago, how would it look different than what we have today?
Sure.
And it'd probably be good in some senses, maybe not. Like, would the Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's and the Target and the would, if we had form-based code decades ago, would we have any of those things or not?
Can I try to answer that?
Yeah.
So I think you would see Home Depot and the Target come up to the street with parking behind, so you don't see parking from the street. Instead, you see attractive buildings, maybe with big sidewalks and walking, and then still have to drive. We don't live in a society where you can't drive, especially here, but places where you park your car that aren't big, massive
More of
parking
an
lots there.
aesthetic than
That's a
incentivizing,
great description.
incentivizing or disincentivizing certain types of business.
Correct. It's also, I wouldn't say just aesthetic, it's also functional. When you think about the Home Depot and the Target and all of that,
Yeah.
if you're at the Home Depot and you want to go to Target, are you going to walk from Home Depot to Target? You're probably not going to do that because of the form of the development.
Yeah.
So to the mayor's point, if that development were developed under form-based code, it would have more connectivity to it. So that if it's called the park once mentality. If you're arriving in that area, it's designed in a way you can park once and you can go to all the things. Whereas today, really everything is behind an enormous field of parking. And so there's no consideration given for how a human person gets from place to place. It's really how do you get your car from place to place.
So that'd be a good example of something in the state that accomplishes that goal.
Sure, I would say some of the parts of Salt Lake City that have been using form-based code for some time have been doing a much better job of doing that. I'd say Central Sugar House, there's a Whole Foods there. There's lots of stuff that is developed in a way that makes it a lot easier. If you get to Sugar House, if any of you go there, my first advice is to abandon your car as soon as possible. Walking around Sugar House, very, very easy. Driving around Sugar House, not so easy. So the development pattern is really designed around how do we make it so people don't have to add to the traffic problem by driving from thing to thing to thing. You get to the commercial area, you park once and you can do all the things you need to do. So Sugar House, as it stands today, was not developed under form-based code, but the things that are happening now are used under that form-based code. It takes the time frame of a form-based code, we're talking 20-25 years. So this is very much an.
So, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around this. So I was born and raised, I grew up in Sugar House.
Okay.
And so it's very different today than when I grew up.
Indeed.
So a lot of the change has been big high-rise apartments with retail in the bottom.
Sure.
Is that what you're kind of talking about?
Well, the height is context
Sure.
specific
To
to Cottonwood Heights. The use discussion is really divided between ground floor and upper floors. And so that idea of what's appropriate on the ground floor of the building may not work and vice versa. And so that idea of having ground floor retail, ground floor services and upper floor, other uses on the upper floors, that's really where the use discussion comes in. It's a lot less prescriptive to say, we want to Whole Foods here. It's really saying if it meets the form-based code, then it's permitted.
Well,
As a local well, I don't know, I love what happened to Sugar House. Maybe that's not a good example, because it is like so hard to get around now.
There's some new discoveries there though. For example, the Wasatch Brewery that's on the corner.
Just
has
cool.
patio seating, but
Yeah.
parking structure is really hidden so that you can park in that parking structure behind it. You
Where
don't even know
Habit
it's
Burger
there.
used to be,
I don't know where it used to be,
Yeah,
but
there's a lot back there.
so that's
Yeah.
the lot. that
And
we're
then there's a
talking
there's a structure there
about.
underneath
Underneath
all.
Cold Stone and all that.
yeah, so you just once you park there, you have access to everything.
Yeah.
Once you're down there. But that's kind of unique. I think that's kind of what these ideas of home-based code.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that what is happening in Sugar House will happen
Yeah.
here. There's a very specific set of economics
Yeah, yeah.
there that don't necessarily apply. I think Central Sugar House, that's a regional draw. People are arriving there, they've got jobs and all kinds
Yeah.
of things going there. These nodes are far smaller and the scale, I'd say, is far more community facing, where they're more neighborhood scale businesses. But that idea of multi-story development, all of those things are built into the.
Sorry, one more question. So I'm comparing Fort Union, all the shops were like, Dick's and Chick-fil-A and all of that stuff is, even though that's not technically in Colorado Heights. But that compared to Sugar House, when we're talking about the pub and we're talking about this other stuff, the parking is behind, so it is facing the street. And I guess over where like Five Guys and stuff is, there's a big parking lot and then it's a strip mall. So is that the main difference? It's just shifting the buildings forward and then pushing the parking back? Is that the big revolutionary change?
Well, I'd say from a site planning standpoint, that would be required if the buildings address the street, and that's where the that's really a more traditional development pattern. The strip mall mentality, this is an experiment that we have realized doesn't give us what we really need in a community. And so how that development promotes walkability, connectivity, the visual, benefits to the community. Form-based code covers a lot of things. There's landscape requirements, lots of things in there, but from a site planning standpoint, to the mayor's point, requiring the parking in the back, having the building up against the street, that's kind of a
More attractive for sure.
Mark, can I add one thing? Will my voice catch on the mic okay okay?
So,
I just am part of this, but, a few seats back over here. I will say too, we did take great care to, kind of design the parking requirements so that parking is still a requirement. So it's not like we're saying, no, don't have to do any parking at all. Everyone's gonna walk. I think the context of Cottonwood Heights is just inherently different. It is a suburb. I, like the convenience of driving. So I will say, one of the cool things about form-based code is it is very customized to the community. So we can look at examples of different places that have used it, but I want to remind everybody that it's kind of been cast through a lens of like, well, what works here? We've seen it work in other
we're
places.
setting our own standard.
Yeah, so it's, we can look at some projects we like that have been done under it, but want to remind everybody, it's the beauty of form-based code is it's not a plug and play thing.
Sure.
Like our original code was from
Yeah.
Public County, where we say we're adopting the whole thing over, we're able to calibrate it, and so we still gave consideration to required parking.
Thanks,
It's not.
that's helpful.
It will
I haven't
not be
spent a lot of time on form-based code, so that's.
It does
That's why I'm
promote
asking.
sharing parking between uses as well, where today the code's like, hey, if you're a dentist office, it's this many stalls per 1,000 square feet. Even if you're right next to a strip mall that has so much excess parking, it's half empty. The form-based code allows you to use complementary uses to use the same parking. Parking's like that trick equation for any business that wants to come in, and how you balance how that looks and how much you need for a business to be incentivized to use it. I don't think the form-based code is not going to result in a lot of new giant strip mall developments, but it's also going to allow our successful ones to continue to thrive. but hopefully prevent things like, you know, what we got at Hillside Plaza from happening,
Hmm.
where the regulations are so rigid in how a site has to be laid out that it doesn't allow, you know, creative change over time. It's gonna give future development some more flexibility.
If I-
Councilmember Burrell wanted to add something.
Thank you. I received a very thoughtful communication from a constituent. It actually went to all of the council colleagues. And the constituent voiced a real concern about, you know, what is our community turning into? So I would like to acknowledge and appreciate that input and point out that these overlay areas are very limited. So we're not talking about form-based code, the same kind of, you know, commercial mixed use going throughout our S1, our single family neighborhoods. This is really to improve along Fort Union Boulevard predominantly, the whole experience for whether you're a motorist or walking or rolling. It would be, you know, applied very judiciously. So again, it's just a certain overlay areas. It's not, you know, basically going out through into residential communities.
Indeed, and usually a form-based code is really applied to commercial areas with a high likelihood of redevelopment. And so again, as property owners decide they'd like to redevelop, it's really codifying community goals to say, okay, here's what the code should really require in order to accomplish those things. But every community, you know, you'll be 2 years into a form-based code and you'll say, okay, these things, these particular parameters are causing some issues. Let's calibrate that a little bit. To Sam's point, you really can't pick up a code from another city and just apply it. You have to calibrate it to what, you know, kind of what those requirements are. The last thing I'll mention is talking just a little bit about process. We've spent a good deal of time with staff and the Planning Commission to kind of work through some idea of how that process will work. A form-based code is very graphic, and so the requirements, the parameters are spelled out in a way that should make it a lot easier, one, for staff to review, two, for property owners to understand what those requirements are. If you go to the next slide, Mike, we've also, we spoke about this some time ago of giving some property owners a fast track approach to development. If it's a small enough size, it meets all of the form-based code requirements. Some of those may qualify for an administrative approval of their project. So you can see in this map, the blue parcels are those that may potentially qualify for that fast track approval process, which really the intent there is to free up time for the Planning Commission, for the City Council to really look at larger scale development that'll have a larger impact. All of these are those that are under 1 acre. Development would have to be under a 20,000 square foot size structure. And any of those that land in the residential transition district, which are those that are kind of adjacent to single family neighborhoods, those any of those that are in those areas would have to go through a more rigorous process, but really giving those who are meeting those requirements an administrative approach to kind of make things move along a little faster as redevelopment comes along.
Explain the blue squares, what do they represent?
So the blue squares there are all of the parcels that are under 1 acre in these areas. So if those developments, if they're under 1 acre and under a certain size, they could qualify for that administrative approval.
Does this give us more architectural control?
Yes. It does give you architectural control. These are not architectural design guidelines, so they don't say, you know, here's the style the building has to be, here's the color of brick or anything like that. But it does give a lot more architectural direction for the form of the development. So it's not to say here is the style that Cottonwood Heights requires. It just says here is how the form is required to be expressed.
Examples would be if you have a horizontal wall, it has to have breaks and articulation in it, and ground floor transparency or window openings and things like that.
Yeah, so there's far more architectural guidance, but the benefit is that the uses are far more flexible than they are currently. I think that's
Well,
it.
awesome. No, that's perfect. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Anything, Mike, you want to add before we?
No, we'll plan to just, if you'd like another work session at this, if you want to go through anything in more detail, let us know. But like I said, it's in your hands now, from here on out until, consideration.
Okay, perfect. We'll work on that. Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate you
Yeah.
coming. Thanks for
Thank you.
the work you're doing for us. So the last item under staff report is lobbyist agreements. And so we do this every year where we renew contracts with lobbyists. And we do have a request for change. So I'm gonna let our Scott here just talk about that for us.
Yeah, so we have two lobbyist contracts. One is with Brian Allen and his company, where we pay them $36,000 a year to be lobbyist for us. And then we have one with Greg Curtis. We've been paying him $30,000 a year. That was a renegotiation, if you will. It was originally intended to be at 36,000 and then was renegotiated down to 30. He's asking if we could increase that to 36,000. Budgetarily, we're budgeted at the 30,000. So eventually we would need to address that budgetarily if we do that. And then that's the financial aspect of it. Shane, I don't know if you have more that you want to add in on that.
Yeah, I could say that in 2018, well, the original agreements between the city and Brian Allen on the one hand, city and Greg Curtis on the other, were both entered into in 2017. Brian Allen's original contract was for 42,000. In 2018, that was reduced to 36,000. And as to Greg Curtis, his original contract was for 36,000. 2018, that was reduced to 30,000. So I think that 2018 was the year that we did the tax increase. So I think that that was probably the genesis of those reductions. And so now Greg Curtis is asked to go back to the 36,000 that he was being paid under the 2017. In 2017, Brian Allen, I guess, has not made that request. So
Yeah.
to me, the two contracts are, the two providers do different things for the city. Brian Allen is on the ground. He's taking care of everything from soup to nuts. And Greg Curtis's responsibility has mainly been to try to find road and infrastructure funding for the city.
Yeah, I think this last year was a really good example of what Greg can and has done for us in acquiring money for us. So anyway, I would be in favor of that. I guess, do we need a simple majority and then we'll vote next week?
Yeah, I would do a resolution if it sounds like you want to continue with both. I can do another 2-year. We usually roll these for 2 years at a time. We do an amendment to each of these agreements, and then the other issue is whether you want to pay Greg Curtis the additional 6,000 that he's requesting.
Do you expect that Brian Allen will come back to us with that 42? Do they kind of do equivalent work?
I think go ahead.
My 2 cents would be, it's pretty abnormal for, it obviously can happen, but I would probably say it's probably decent practice to pay them the same. If it's a question of what we're getting or not getting, that needs to be communicated by the city. And that's communicated of what our expectations are, just like any client would. But I would probably say it makes sense to pay them the same. So there's not a disparity between the two of them. And if that's 30, if that's 36, if that's whatever, that's a different discussion. But I think what makes the most sense is we have 2 lobbyists that represent the city. They should be getting paid the same rate. And if there's a discussion of if someone's doing more or less or whatever, that's something that the city needs to communicate with them.
We have a majority to move forward with that.
Yeah. I'm gonna make the most of it.
Okay, yes, let's move forward here.
So increase Curtis to 36 and both of them get 2-year extensions. Okay, great.
Thank you. Okay, item 5, review of calendars and upcoming events. Cottonwood Heights Arts Council Play Beauty and the Beast starts next week, July 12th, 13th, 15th, 18th to 20th. Performance at 7 and 2 p.m. matinees at Butler Middle School. hopefully we'll all be able to attend. Biology Makes the Water, July 13th from 5 until 6:30 PM at the City Hall Colmore Community Room. Butlerville Days, July 25th, 26th, and 27th. At Butler Park and the Bark in the Park at Mountain View Park on August 24th from 9:30 AM to 11:30 AM. So we do have an item to discuss in a closed meeting today concerning property litigation and the character and competence of an individual. Could I get a motion to move into a closed session?
Motion,
How
go
do you
ahead,
do
please.
this? So we don't actually close the work session, right?
No.
We are making a motion to Shane,
Move into a closed session.
move into a closed session to discuss litigation, property acquisition, and the character and professional competence of the physical or mental health of an individual.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.